What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the all-new 2020 Subaru Legacy. Huge thanks to Subaru for providing me here with the all-new Legacy to review for you guys today. So about the new Legacy, well, if you look at this side by side with the old one, to the untrained eye, it'd be hard to even see which one is the new one. I mean, they did change a good bit, but it's very evolutionary and isn't a huge departure from the old one. So I will say it looks good, it's conservative, and that's something that I think is getting more rare these days in this segment, you know, with many of the competitors having more polarizing designs or, you know, something that stands out a little bit more. I think this is for those who do want to blend in, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that's definitely the approach that they're taking here with the new Legacy. But up front you have standard LED headlamps now, and I do like the accent light you have there within them. The grille's a little bit bolder. I mean, the whole vehicle, every panel is new, so it's not like there's anything that's shared. It's just, you know, looks a lot like the old version. But the front bumper has a little bit more sculpting to it than before as well. And overall, I don't think there's anything wrong with the front end. It's nice looking, but doesn't really excite me a whole lot either. The one thing that is a nice little detail though, coming down to the sides, I noticed, you know, you have this chrome strip for the windows, but it continues on into the side view mirror here. And I just thought that was a nice little touch. Gives a little bit of a classier look in my opinion. Otherwise though, you know, the whole vehicle is a little more blocky than some of the others. You know, recently in the past few years, many of the competitors have gone to a more leaner and lower design. This has a nice tall design, which I think taller drivers will actually appreciate, but it's, you know, a little bit of a higher design and stuff. It's not trying to be hugging the ground like many of the competitors look like they are. Out back, I do like the darker tail lamps you have. Those are a nice improvement in my opinion. Otherwise though, I mean, they hid the exhaust pipes. There's no hint of sportiness whatsoever. There is a sport trim of the Legacy you can get, which gives you a meager little rear deck lid spoiler there, but that's it. This one doesn't have that though, this being the limited version. But for those who are buying a limited trim, you know, most likely you want something a little more classy and conservative. Some people might like that. I personally prefer a lot of the designs of the competitors. I think they're more exciting. But if you do, you know, find those to be a little too repulsive for you, I think this will, you know, nicely blend in and probably won't offend too many people. All right, so start them, go for a drive. It's of course keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start. And if you're wondering about the interior of this vehicle, I did a full in-depth interior review with my wife actually, so you can go watch that video. I'll link it above there, and you can hear all of the thoughts on the interior here. Overall, it's one of the nicest and most plush interiors in the segment, one of the most high-tech as well. But let's hit the road and see how it drives. All right, so setting off here in the 2020 Subaru Legacy. So first thing that I think I notice about it is you have a little bit of a higher seating position than a lot of the competitors. So I'd say it's about as high as what you get in like the new Hyundai Sonata and maybe like a Ford Fusion, something similar to that. But you know, stuff like the new Honda Accord and Nissan Altima, and even the Toyota Camry seems to have a little bit of a lower seating position, a little bit sportier of a feel. This is a little closer to an SUV, still is definitely sedan-like, but you know, a little bit of a higher seating position, but that gives you great visibility. Subaru's really good about doing excellent visibility. They always have massive windows. I mean, the windshield is huge here. You have a nice thin A-pillar, a huge window there at the A-pillar, so very easy to see around that mirror, which is nicely on the door now and not on the A-pillar like they used to be. The view out of the back is also really good, and currently the only other competitor to this really is the Nissan Altima all-wheel drive, and that, whenever they changed it over for all-wheel drive, the back end got a little bit of a higher lift, so you don't have as good of a view out of the back in the Altima, and you're actually staring at the sky half the time, versus this is a normal view out of the back. So an important little distinction that I think the Legacy does better here. Other things, just coasting down a hill here, it's a very quiet and refined ride. They really, you know, this is on Subaru's new global platform, and it's a lot stiffer as far as the chassis and stuff, so it's a lot more composed, but it just gives it a very smooth and very quiet ride. And it is, the comfort in this is just sublime. It is so, so good. But it's not all great as far as the driving experience, which I'll get to here in a little bit. First thing you notice whenever you're kind of accelerating here is you have, you know, a naturally aspirated engine, but it's connected to a CVT. So that gives you a little bit of a disconnect. And while some of the other manufacturers these days are getting better at making CVTs feel more like normal automatic transmissions with, you know, actual shift points and less of a rubber bandy kind of feel. This is still kind of vague with its throttle response, and I mean, if you're aggressive, it'll respond, obviously, but it honestly feels like I'm pressing on a half deflated balloon, which is then connected to the gas pedal, which then causes it to go. And so it never is very sharp to me, and it's very relaxed. If you're a limo driver or someone who really wants a smooth acceleration and doesn't want any kind of jerky movements or anything, you can be pretty rough with your throttle inputs and still have a very smooth acceleration experience. So that's nice, but then even climbing a hill, I mean, this CVT really makes this engine sound buzzy. Brakes, thankfully, are very predictable and feel very good. You got a little bit of travel to them, but then they do bite down nicely. But let's turn down onto this back road here and see about the power, shall we? Here we go. So see, it just holds, it like the power comes in waves. There's a couple of shift points there, but it's just very odd as far as how it accelerates, and that's how CVTs over the past several years have done accelerations. But it just smooths out the power, so it's very, I guess it hides the fact that it's accelerating, but it's not as exciting as even like the Nissan Altima with its new CVT. Those actually feel peppier, a little more punchy, and you feel like, wow, I'm actually flooring it. This, you feel like when you're flooring it, it doesn't feel like you're actually flooring it. It's just like, oh, you're giving it 50% gas. It's like, no, it's actually giving it all it's got. It's just kind of odd with the way that it does that. But whenever you do wake up this motor here, it's a 2.5 liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder boxer engine, and it does 182 horsepower, 176 pound-feet of torque, and it'll do 0 to 60 in 8 seconds, which also is about a half second slower than most of the competition with their base engines. And that even goes for like the Nissan Altima with its all-wheel drive, which is a little bit heavier. It still is a few milliseconds faster than this is. So, you know, I think those are like 7.7 seconds. Not huge differences, but the Legacy here, combined with this CVT and the fact there's not much power, this is one of the few vehicles that I actually don't enjoy accelerating in. Like, it does it okay and it's fine, but it's not an enjoyable experience. And even in some of these slower, you know, or some of the competitors that have about the same amount of horsepower, those still, again, like the Altima, I found myself being impressed with the way that it accelerated. Even though it wasn't fast, it was authoritative with the way it got up and started moving. Everything is very relaxed in the Legacy, and I'll kind of unpack that a little bit more here later on, but it's definitely set up to be a more comfortable feel. And even on this road, which is pretty rough right now, you hear a little bit of road noise, but it is so subdued, and that's what the Legacy is focused on. It's not a sporty experience like it used to be with some of them in the past. This is all about comfort and trying to minimize, I think, the driving experience a little bit. Now, they claim it's the best handling Legacy ever. I'm guessing they're talking about standard Legacies, because my Legacy GT Spec B about 10 years ago handled much better than this does. But as we go around some corners here, you have a little bit of lean, and honestly, the main thing is you don't have a lot of grip. You have these Yokohama all-season tires, but they're only 225 wide. For example, the Nissan Altima with its all-wheel drive setup, those tires are 235 wide, so you get a little bit of extra width there, and I think that really helps the handling. The fact you're sitting up a little bit higher here in the Legacy also doesn't help its handling cause. Now, it's not bad. I mean, compared to, you know, all the competitors just a few years back, this would hands down be the best. But these days, with the Honda Accord just being such a fantastic driver's car and such a good handler, even the new Nissan Altima, I was really impressed with the handling of that. The Camry is also very good. There's so many good handling vehicles in the segment, Mazda 6 as well. This is kind of towards the bottom of the pack as far as handling goes, in my opinion, just because of the grip. I'm going around these corners very gingerly. I am not driving this nearly as spiritedly as I usually do in other sportier cars or anything, but it just, like, I could hear the tires start to squeal way sooner in this than I do in anything else, and it's just so understeery. Once you do start to push a little bit, I mean, all it wants to do is just push out. It does not want to dive in. They do say there's brake-based torque vectoring going on here with the new Legacies. I couldn't feel anything. It still wanted to push. It just feels like it does not want to do it. Like, it's just, you hear the tires groaning, you know, the whole vehicle is kind of a little bit softer with its setup, and it doesn't feel like it wants to go around corners in any kind of sporty fashion. And I get it. This is a standard Legacy. This is the limited trim. It's not really set up to be sporty. You know, the XT versions you can get do give you more power, and those might be a little bit sportier, but even those, it's not a sporty version. It's just supposed to take the place of the 6-cylinder for those who want more power. And so you know, there's nothing wrong with going after the comfort segment, but it's just, you know, Subaru used to be a little bit more of an enthusiastic brand, and they still have the WRX and the BRZ for those who do want an enthusiast vehicle. But unfortunately, it seems like the Legacy is now focused on being a comfortable commuter. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. It just is a distinction that while many of the other competitors these days, you know, Toyota is desperately trying to make the Camry more fun and exciting. They even do a TRD version now, and Honda has manual transmissions in some of the Accords if you want it. It seems like most of the other competitors are trying to inject more excitement into their offerings, and Subaru seems to have a little bit less. I think they're like, okay, everyone else is going to be sporty. They're zigging, we're going to zag. We're just going to go more for comfort and, you know, get those buyers who are annoyed by all the enhanced sportiness and all these newer family sedans and just want something soft and comfortable. And I think that's what they're going for here. And I can't blame them for going for that, because there's, I mean, me as an enthusiast, we're the minority. Most people out there, the overwhelming majority, just want a comfortable, relaxed cruiser to go back and forth to work in. And I think as far as that goes, the Legacy probably does that a little bit better than most. Steering also has a nice and lighter weight to it, which again reflects its more comfort-oriented attitude. The most you can change the driving experience is by going over to the manual mode here, and you do have paddle shifters, which is a nice inclusion. We can try those out here and see how they do. So this is first simulated gear, and it is responsive. Then it will shift like a normal automatic, and it's actually responding to all my commands. It's holding on to those gears. And so if you do want to be a little sporty with your Legacy here, manual shifting is actually a pretty good experience. A lot of other CVTs, they're not very obedient. They don't hold gears, or it still is kind of slushy. This is very precise, so I do like the way that they do the manual shifting in their CVTs at Subaru. The curb weight for these, though, is pretty good. They kept it in check and actually dropped, I think, about 30 or 40 pounds off of the old Legacy. So it is an improvement, but these still weigh 3,540 pounds or so, give or take, depending on which trim level you're in and how many options you have. But so that's about, you know, where you're going to be at, which is pretty good. And I will say that's about a little over 100 pounds lighter than the Nissan Altima all-wheel drive. So the weight is good. It's just the Altima seems to just, you know, it's got a lower seating position, a flatter and grippier handling feel to it. And so despite the extra weight in the Altima, I think it's the better handler of the two. The all-wheel drive system here, though, in the Legacy is very good. I mean, that's something that Subaru is famous for, their symmetrical all-wheel drive, and it did a very good job. There's actually one of the days where I was driving through a snowstorm, and as you can see, it was pretty low visibility, and, you know, the roads were actually completely covered with snow. And, yeah, I mean, these are all-season tires, and tires really make the biggest difference as far as how a vehicle handles in the snow. But I will say that, you know, it was climbing hills just fine. It was actually, you know, very confidence-inspiring and very planted and secure with its feeling. So whenever you're not trying to drive in a sporting manner, how's the Legacy to drive just in normal daily driving stuff? And I've already put 167 miles on the Legacy here. I've been driving it all week, and it's a very pleasant vehicle to drive. Again, for running your errands and things like that, it's fine. I just wish that it was a little more normal with its acceleration. Other than that, I have no issues, except this EyeSight Driver Assistance thing, which is the beeping that you've been hearing here. This EyeSight system, Cliff Notes is that it's the most active and most hand-holding of all the safety systems I've ever tested to date. If you're someone who likes your hand being held with the safety systems, you know, really intervening a lot and really giving you lots of alerts, if you're one of the few people who like that, then you will love the Legacy. For everyone else, I think you're going to feel like it's a little overreaching, it's a little overreactive, and there's various different things that I noticed during the week here with this EyeSight tech that kind of were a little bit annoying. The first is that it has this lane departure prevention system, and so basically it goes one step further than all the other like lane departure warning systems you get from many of the other competitors, where if you're going over a line or if you're getting really, really close to a line, it'll give you an alert. Those I can kind of understand. Some of those can also get a little bit annoying, but this actually will do steering assist the entire time. So much like how on some of the more advanced adaptive cruise control systems, it'll give you the lane keep assist, where it'll actually help you with steering. This does that even in every single time you turn on the vehicle, it wants to help you steer. Every single moment as you're driving, unless you're on a perfectly straight road and you're perfectly in the middle of that road of your lane, otherwise it is always nudging at the steering wheel. It's constantly giving me these tiny little corrections. So I almost feel like I'm in like a driver's ed car or something half the time, where it's telling me like, oh, you need to be a little bit centered in your lane a little bit more. And like me personally, I usually like giving myself as much space from other drivers as I can. So if I'm on a 2-lane road, I'm going to be hugging a little closer to the shoulder. If I'm on the highway and I'm in the left lane passing, then I'm going to be a little bit closer to the shoulder. Again, I always am on that side of the lane. I don't go straight down the middle, and this vehicle just does not seem to like that type of driving style. So if you drive perfectly in the middle of your lane all the time, maybe it'll give you less alerts, but for me, it's often nudging at the wheel. And it got so annoying, after the first 30 miles of driving, I went in to turn it off. And when I went in to turn it off, what I noticed is thankfully you can turn it off, and it does stay off between key cycles. So if you are like, I don't ever want to have this thing steer for me, you can do that, and you don't have to constantly go in and change that, which is super nice. But in exchange, it gives you a constant orange warning light that is always there telling you it is not helping you steer. I guess that's a lawyer thing, because if people are used to having the steering and then they don't have that assist, then people are just not going to be able to steer themselves anymore, I guess. I don't know. But so if you're used to driving around with the check engine light on, or if you're used to having warning lights on the dash, then maybe that won't bother you. I did get used to it over the course of the week, because I just basically gave up on this EyeSight system and started to try and use it off and on a little bit towards the end of the week again. But yeah, I did learn to live with the warning light, and that would be my preference over having the thing constantly steer for me. But it's just unfortunate you have to pick between one or the other. That's just one example of where this system falls short. Another thing is that it's, since it's always having to keep track of those lanes, because it's always helping you steer, anytime you go through an intersection or anytime there is just a break in the road lines for whatever reason, it'll give you a heads-up display alert and a beep telling you that it is no longer tracking the lane. And it does that, depending on where you're at. If you're in a city or something where you're constantly going through intersections, it's constantly being like, nope, no more, and it'll constantly be beeping at you. And so that's a little bit annoying, that it's always alerting you every time it doesn't see the lanes perfectly. And even times where the lanes aren't broken up, if it's just staring into direct sunlight or the visibility conditions aren't great, then it can also lose track of that and again give you another alert. It'll also give you alert, has this driver monitoring system, which I think is actually really ahead of its time, and it's a brilliant idea, and I love the idea of it, because it also does driver monitoring, so it can tell if you're distracted, and I love that. And I honestly wish every single car had a driver monitoring system, because distracted driving is such a huge issue, and I love that Subaru is taking the lead of being proactive and being like, let's try and actually hold people accountable and tell them to keep their eyes on the road. And I like that it does that. Unfortunately, since their system is the first system to really do that, it's very much a beta type thing, and it's not perfect. And there's been several times where it's told me to keep my eyes on the road, and my eyes have been staring at the road. And so sometimes it's something will set it off so simple as just me scratching my face, and it'll be like, oh no, like we can't see your eyes anymore, and it thinks that I've passed out or something. And then there's other times where I just don't know if my eyes aren't open wide enough, or if I'm just glancing over for a split second, it'll be really it doesn't give you much leeway, I guess, and that's fine. It's giving me a lot of false alerts. I don't text and drive or anything like that, so there's been no times where I've been truly distracted, and yet it's constantly freaking out at me. I would say it does it at least 2 or 3 times per 20-minute drive. One good thing is it does work very well at night for the most part. It also works with sunglasses, which I was impressed with, because in addition to it just monitoring you, it also will scan your face whenever you first start up the vehicle and adjust all your settings for your climate and your radio and your seat and all that kind of stuff. And it does that even if I get into the car with my sunglasses on. It'll scan my face, still know who I am, and that worked without fail. So there are some very good parts of this system, and I think with a little bit of tweaking, it can actually be best in class and the model that everyone else should model their systems after. But currently, it still needs a little bit of work. Again, it still gets too confused, and again, adds to that annoyance factor that I got more and more as I drove this vehicle throughout the course of the week. Another nice thing that it does do is that it'll actually alert you whenever the car in front of you moves up. If you're sitting in traffic and you don't notice for whatever reason, if you're talking to someone, or if you're just, it actually happened to me because I just decided to give a little bit of an additional gap because there was an open driveway where I wanted to allow people to be able to come and go. But whenever that car moved up and I didn't move up, it did alert me to that, which I think is great. Again, if you're someone who is distracted, this is a very good vehicle to help keep you on your toes so that you become a better driver, hopefully. So that is good. But one thing that I also didn't love about this system is it did actually do an automatic emergency braking scenario that was a false alert. And so there was a time I was driving into the sun, and there was a car in front of me that actually was speeding up, wasn't slowing down. And so I was accelerating, and the car thought that the car in front of me was like slamming on its brakes and started to preload the brakes. It didn't do a full ABS stop, but it started to preload the brakes, and it gave me all kinds of alerts like I was getting ready to hit somebody, and it terrifies you whenever it does that. And everything was fine. And thankfully, since I still had my foot on the gas, it continued to let me to move forward. So thankfully I didn't get rear-ended or something. But again, these systems are still not quite perfect, and I like that companies are trying to rush these things to market to make the world a safer place, but I don't think this stuff is ready for the prime time, and I think it still distracts people a lot. It freaks people out a lot. Like I said, I appreciate the idea behind a lot of this stuff, and I think that in time it will get good, but currently it just feels a little half-baked still to me. So that's, just something that I noticed. Maybe your experience will be different, but I just noticed this system was a little more overbearing than it should be. And I don't want to sound like I'm complaining the whole time, but one other thing I do have to mention that's a little bit of a disappointment here in the Legacy is the fuel economy here. So these are rated at 27 in the city, 35 on the highway, and 30 combined. Now, my driving was mostly city driving, so I should have been close to that 27 number. I did do a little bit of highway driving though, so it wasn't straight stop and go or anything. But my average fuel economy here has been 23.9 mpg. And I'll often get about 2 mpg less in my vehicles than what the city rating is, just with the type of driving I do. So I was expecting 25, and that would have been, average, I guess, although still not great, but average. But this, to be, a full mpg less than that, almost 24 mpg, I mean, that's not horrible for an all-wheel drive vehicle. There goes this safety system again. But that's not horrible for an all-wheel drive vehicle, but still just not as impressive as the window sticker suggests it should be. And so again, your experience will vary depending on your type of driving and all that type of stuff, where you're driving and stuff. But for me, I found the fuel economy to be a little bit disappointing considering the high expectations the window sticker sets. But one thing the Legacy does very, very well, and this is one of the things that I think they do better than just about everyone else, is the value here in the Legacy, and what you get for the money is fantastic. So you get such a plush interior, like I said. You get all this high-tech stuff you don't get with all the other competitors, the additional safety tech that you don't get with all the other competitors, and so all this stuff it's really impressive just how much you get for the money. And even whenever you compare it to the Ultima all-wheel drive, which again is like the only other main competitor here, the Subaru here is actually up almost $3,000 less than the starting price of the cheapest Ultima all-wheel drive. So these come in right around $23,500 for the starting price, including destination, for the Legacy. And again, there's nothing else in this segment that can touch that for, with all-wheel drive for that price, not even close. But even as you go up the trim ladder, comparing the non-turbo Legacy and its fully loaded limited trim like this one's about $32,500. I think it's like $32,670 to be exact. That is still about $2,000 less than the top Ultima all-wheel drive. $2,000 is a big chunk of change whenever you're talking about something in this price segment. There is Toyota coming with the all-wheel drive Camry here in 2020, but they haven't announced pricing as of the time of me filming this. So we'll have to see, where that comes in. But as of right now, if you want an all-wheel drive mid-size family sedan, this is still the king as far as value goes. Another thing that I have to mention real quick is the auto stop start system, which is a new addition here to the Legacy. Auto stop start in most vehicles is a little bit annoying because, it has to start up the engine every time, it turns off at a red light and stuff, which is okay. But with this one, whenever you're actually starting and then you're accelerating immediately, it is pretty smooth and seamless, no real complaints there. But whenever you're stopped at a red light, and like I'm in the winter here, so it's pumping heat for me, and so it can only do the start-stop function for I don't know, maybe 30 seconds or less before it has to kick the engine back on. And whenever it kicks the engine back on, whenever you're still trying to stay stopped, it is an intense startup, and it rocks the whole vehicle. And honestly, it feels like if I didn't have my foot hard enough on the brake, the car would lurch forward. Like, that's how aggressive the start-stop is here in this vehicle. This was by far the most intense start-stop system that I've ever experienced, at least whenever you're sitting at a red light. But yeah, so overall, I do like the way the Legacy drives, and if you're looking for something that's comfort-oriented, I think this is going to be probably the perfect choice, because I don't think any of the competitors do comfort better. The Mazda 6 might be the closest, but this, you know, just has an extra layer of plushness to it that you don't get with most of the competitors, and just makes for a very comfortable and relaxing daily driver. And so if that's all you're looking for, I think this is very good. But you know, it's a bit of a mixed message, because it almost feels like the driving dynamics and stuff, like it's going for an older demographic, and the safety tech and stuff is that it's going for an older demographic that just, you know, wants something safe and comfortable, and that's it. But then you have this cutting edge technology that I think would upset some of those older demographic people who want something more traditional. So I think if you're, you know, a techie person that wants a comfortable driving experience, this is going to be right up your alley and exactly what you want. For others, you know, you're definitely going to want to test drive it and see. And I do hope that someday they do a Sporty or Legacy once again, because now they have the turbo engine back. I would love to see some type of new Spec B or STI version of the Legacy for those enthusiasts who do want something a little bit bigger than a WRX, want something maybe a little more comfortable than a WRX, but do want a little bit of a sharper handling feel that I think, you know, Honda and Toyota and others have found within their demographics of people who, you know, want a manual transmission or just want a sportier setup and want good handling and stuff. I think, you know, there are some Subaru buyers that would like that as well. And so I hope that they do a sportier version of the Legacy here someday. But in the meantime, you know, the Legacy here is a very pleasant thing to live with. And you know, like I said, if everything I described sounds like something you'd really enjoy, definitely check it out. Like I said, the value can't be beat in this segment, and it's certainly worth a look. So anyway, huge thanks to Subaru for providing me with the Legacy here to review for you guys today. Let me know your thoughts on the Legacy in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.